sure when my interest in the Roman Empire actually began. It could have been in high school when I had to study Latin, or more likely it was when I saw movies like Ben-Hur and Spartacus when I was a kid. But one way or the other, I got hooked on it. Now, I just finished a history of Rome, which was really, really outstanding. SPQR by Mary Beard. Now, SPQR, you see those initials all over the place in Rome. They stand for Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and people of Rome. And the reality is that's kind of like the ancient equivalent of USA. Now, this book, SPQR, covers about maybe 1,000 years of Roman history. It covers the time from in the 8th century BC when Romulus and Remus got the bright idea for this city, down to the 3rd century AD when the Emperor Caracalla decided to make absolutely everybody in the entire empire Roman citizens. Well, all the free people anyway. And you know from St. Paul that being a Roman citizen was a kind of a big deal back then. Now, along the way, in the course of these 1,000 years, Rome got to rule the entire known world. And that's her history. Now, here's how the book is put together. She starts off in actually the middle of the story in 63 BC with Cicero's attack on a guy called Catiline. Now, that hooked me right away because Cicero was the bane of my existence in my junior year in high school. I thought his Latin was almost impossible, and I never really understood what was going on with this guy Catiline. Now, all of a sudden, reading this book, I got it. And that's because of the way, first off, she describes these guys more or less as ordinary politicians, and she reports Cicero's attack in modern English, a language I could understand. Okay, so she starts off in 63 BC, then she jumps back to the beginning, to the founding of the city. And she covers Rome's gradual takeover of Italy and then the takeover of everything else. Now, the way she does it is to first take a look at what the Romans themselves said about it, because they wrote a lot. And then she takes all that stuff apart. She peels out the political propaganda, and there's a lot of it. She takes a look at archaeological evidence. She throws in some common sense and lays out more or less what probably happened. And she doesn't really dwell too much on personalities other than, I'd say, Cicero. She just kind of looks at the big picture sort of things. And she also does a pretty fair job of describing what it was like to be an average person in the empire. There are several things I think make this book particularly enjoyable. First off, it's not some dry-as-dust reference book. The story moves along at a great pace, and it's told in sort of conversational English. The people that she talks about all seem to be real. Now, of course, they're mostly politicians, but they're dealing with real issues that you understand them. And she describes them in terms that I'll say are pretty modern. For example, if you take the triumvirate that Julius Caesar was part of, she calls that the Gang of Three. It kind of brings it to life. Now, the second thing she does is she blows up a lot of myths, and I'll give you one of them. For example, Cleopatra, no matter what Elizabeth Taylor said, probably didn't die from a snake bite. She couldn't have. And this was, Mary Beard explains why that's the case. And then, she takes apart a guy like Claudius, who comes across like a stumbling old guy in that old TV series. She talks about how Caligula may have been the victim of fake news. And on the other hand, not just blowing up myths, but you remember that scene in Gladiator where Maximus meets Commodus, the Emperor Commodus in the arena? Well, something like that actually happened. I mean, it wasn't, Maximus wasn't real, but Commodus did get into the arena with gladiators. So anyway, the book is super interesting. A lot of those stories, the language is language that you can absolutely understand and relate to. And really, I was totally hooked by this book. Now, I'll tell you what, I was hooked enough by it that what I've decided to do is read this other history of Rome that isn't really recent. I think it's within the last 20 years. It's a book called Rubicon by a guy named Tom Holland, and almost surely I'll have a review of that when I've finished it. But in the meantime, I definitely recommend this SPQR. If you've been intimidated by the history of Rome, by the names of all these emperors and all these dates that it's hard to understand what's going on, you'll enjoy this book. You'll get a lot out of it, and I don't know. She doesn't draw exact parallels with what's going on today, but you can sort of understand this book in today's terms. So anyway, this week's recommendation: SPQR. The woman, Mary Beard, absolutely, absolutely excellent. I'll see you next week.